Welcome to the No BS Short-Term Rental Podcast, an unfiltered look into the global vacation and short-term rental industry.
I'm Mateo Bradford.
And I'm John Stokinger.
And this is our podcast. We bring the right people to the table at the right time, giving you an inside view and take on the short-term rental industry like no other podcast can.
Good morning, Mateo. How are you?
Man, you know what, John? I'm good. I'm back to good. And, I have to actually give you a shout out because of that, man.
I'll take it.
Last week I lost my brother, man, when we were on the road, and just want to know how much I appreciate you, man. I really do. And, I'm always giving flowers to people while they're around. So I'm good this week. You had a big part in that. And I just want to thank you, man. You're my partner and my brother, and I love doing this with you. So yeah, back to fantastic. We're going to have a great show today, and let's get into it.
Well, thank you. It's you had some shit you're going through, so it's understandable, but and of course, like that's what we do. Season 4, episode 15. We're back at it. We got a great host we've been wanting to get on, a great guest. We want to get on. You and I had an opportunity. We didn't get to go last year, but we actually did get to go to STR Wealth in Nashville this year. It was a great show. I learned a lot, and I got to be honest. So, Bill, I'm sorry. I work for a poor startup, so I was there, but I wasn't really there. Right, you were outside the venue.
Was happy to support. I was able to take, to kind of see from the sidelines everything that was going on, and it was incredible. Can't wait to dig into talking about what you're doing and what you're creating. So,
let's make sure that you can attend next year, because it's going to be bigger and better.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. Let's talk about that too, because I was excited. I did go ahead and get a vendor ticket. Was able to attend and got some good takeaways, talked to a bunch of amazing people. It was interesting to see everyone come together. But without further ado, Bill Faeth, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited. I think we swim in the same pool with the No BS podcast and STR Unfiltered. So excited.
Yeah. So disclaimer: if you have an issue with potty mouth, well, first of all, you're probably not listening to our podcast anyways, because I drop multiple F-bombs. This episode might be out Anthony's F-bomb count. Like, I think he said, it was 20 something fucks.
Yeah, that's possible. Shout out to Anthony and Eddie's, but I don't know if that's possible, dude.
That's a year and a half ago. That was
an impressive record.
Yeah. Hopefully you guys have a back end editing like the Dan Patrick show, where you get the ding every time somebody says I'm 6'6", 295 when an F-bomb's dropped.
Right.
That's funny.
We do need to have a bullshit button. Like, like somebody says that. Yeah. That'd be awesome.
Let's talk, Bill. Let's talk, like, your resume is impressive, but how do you go? I'm looking at it. You've been in real estate for over 25 years. You've been dabbling. In 2015, you switched most of your portfolio from residential over STR. Like where? Let's go further than that. Let's go further back. We talk about this a lot, that no one really gets into this industry as like, I'm going to go up and I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be a short-term rental investor. I'm going to, potentially I'm going to get into real estate. That's a different story. But STR is new. Maybe now kids are, 18, 19-year-olds are getting out of high school. They're like, I'm going to get into, short-term rentals. But at our demographic, our age, that wasn't the case. Let's talk, like, what was your first dabblings into what you're doing today? Let's talk about your beginnings.
Real estate in general or STR?
Yes. Like, how do you transition from real estate general into, to what you're doing today?
I'll go all the way back to, I dropped out I had a full ride to UCLA to play golf. I dropped out after 5 months, turned professional at 18 years old.
Okay.
And basically, I never forget my first paycheck. Made $3,500, bought a $3,000 Rolex. And one of my really good friends and my best man at my wedding was my CPA. I'd known him since I was 10, 11, 12 years old, 12 when I started playing golf. So my first year I played professional golf, I made $320,000. which was a lot of money in 1993, a lot.
You were
And
18?
he's like, "What are you going to do with this?" I'm like, "I'm going to fucking Vegas, man. I love blackjack. I love drinking. I love partying, all that type of stuff." I mean, I'm 19 years old with a fake ID, a passport from a guy on my golf team at UCLA was from Sweden. It looked nothing like me, like 5'7", blonde hair. I'm this ginormous, Sasquatch trying to get into bars and clubs. But he said, "Why don't we invest some of that money?" And so he convinced me to buy. It was like $120,000 duplex. And I've just turned 20. That was my first foray into real estate, and it just kind of grew, from there. And I kind of had a little bit of a pit stop where I started Bell Aqua bikinis, and I was drop shipping in from a family I'd stayed with just outside of Sao Paulo, Brazil in 1994. Just one data point. If anybody builds websites out there, it cost me $188,000 and took 7 months to build a website back in the day,
In 90,
which we could do for like $10 on Spotify in 15 minutes today.
yeah.
So I was my business partner in my Glow Golf business, Reg Booth, one of the biggest influences I've had in my life. He bought a place in Estes Park, Colorado that was just for like our district managers and our regional managers. We were about a $36 million a year company at that time. And he didn't tell me. And my family, we went and stayed out there, and it was incredible. I'd never been to Estes Park. And then he bought this 2-bedroom condo, in Destin. And, I owned half of them unbeknownst to myself. And that's kind of how we started. But it was really friends and family and employees and that type of stuff. We had 700 employees at that time. And I'll never forget, we had lunch with a very good friend, William Wilson. He owns Frangista Beach real estate and whatever it is, property management down in Destin, manages like 400 properties. And him and I used to travel together in Asia and South America playing professional golf. And my wife wanted a beach house. And we were sitting at the pizza place in
Wait, first of
38.
all, whose wife doesn't want a beach house?
All of them do.
They all do.
Everybody does.
And I want a beach house too.
Yeah. So if anybody's been to 38, they know the pizza joint on the beach side, and we're having lunch with him and his wife, Mary Bess. I call him Wee Wee. He's the big real estate guy. And Bria's like, "Hey, we want to buy a house down here." And he's all, "How much money do you have?" I said, "About 125K. He's all, "Well, that Highway 98, and this is in like 2015. He's like, "You're gonna have to go on the other side of that at that time." For what Bria wanted. She wanted to see the ocean, hear it, and smell it, and be able to walk to it. And he's like, "Hey, you might want to go to the Redneck Riviera, about a 3-hour drive, and go check out Gulf Shores, because you can't afford here." And because it was
drive right past the Floribama there, you're right in those woods.
exactly.
Welcome to Orange Beach. Yeah.
So we went to about 3-4 weeks later, we flew down to Gulf Shores, and we saw 10 properties in one day. And the first one was the one that we bought down there. It was a tier 2, 4-bedroom, very customized beach house. I didn't know about buying unique at that point, but the way that me and my wife were organically, we just stayed away from the chopped up small cookie cutter stuff. And we bought the one with the grand staircase and, the big mural, and it had a 400 square foot master bedroom and bathroom. It was just crazy. And it ended up standing out. And that's kind of our first foray. And I had a property manager, very typical when somebody doesn't know what they're doing. The agent works, there's a property management company with a real estate brokerage. "Hey, we'll manage it for you." Okay, great. I don't have to do anything. Then I found out in about 3 months, they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. And when I started asking for, P&Ls on the property and, the marketing strategy and plans, and they weren't doing any social media, no Facebook ads, nothing. And so I pulled it away from them and broke my contract and took it over after 3 months. And that's how I started self-managing remotely in short-term rentals in 2015.
So that was 2015. That was your first foray into STR. And this is in Gulf Shores, which I love that market, like the whole anywhere from Alabama, like that whole Gulf, the whole panhandle is just a gold mine. Like it doesn't matter which side you're on, all the way to PCB and further. I mean, it's just amazing. But that was 8 years ago now. How many properties are you managing today?
How many do I manage? I co-host 13. I own 12. I have another one under contract. I'm actually closing on selling one tomorrow. I try to keep my owned portfolio at like no more. I was going to stop at 10, probably 12 to 13. I have no desire to get any more than that. But I kind of have in both my co-hosting business and in my personal property. I don't want to own a property that's doing less than $150,000 a year in revenue. And I didn't have the means to be able to purchase that when I first started. So I've had to grow and rehab and burr and flip and do all the things that I need to do to be able to grow out of cash flow, because I put $126,000 down on that first property, and I've put no additional cash into my STR business. I've grown strictly out of cash flow since then.
Well,
That's amazing. I first stumbled across you probably 3 years ago on Facebook, just doing my research for my side, the vendor side of the industry. And I stumbled across you, and you were going through, it might've been in Gulf Shores, actually. You're going through doing a video of a new home you had just purchased, and you're walking around and you're showing all these different amenities and why this property is a differentiator or different. You're doing outside, inside. It was probably a 15-minute video, maybe a little less, 10 minutes, but it sucked me in. I'm like, who the fuck's this guy? I'm like, but I kind of knows this shit. Like, I don't, and I had never seen you. I just stumbled across you. And then I noticed you got this, you have a large following, and you have this, this Facebook group. And then 2 years later, I think I'm seeing you, your first STR Wealth with Mike. I'm like, oh, this is the same dude. For me, I was like, I'm just kind of putting the pieces together. Have you used Facebook like a lot, your group and what you're doing? And like, has that been a big catalyst for your growth, you think?
It all started back in Clubhouse in end of 2020, I think it was, or 2021, I think is when Clubhouse launched. So I started Build Short-Term Rental Wealth in July of 2020. I was in the educational business, coaching business in the limousine space, which went to zero in about 2 weeks when COVID hit. And I was the first vendor in our industry to give all my products away for free. So I was working for free along with my team, and I had to do something. I mean, I did PPP and EIDL and all that stuff that everybody else did. But I made the fundamental mistake of launching my BillFaeth.com brand to try to help everybody and not niche down and be specific. And Chris, my COO, who was with me, he's been with me for 6 years. He runs the Wealth Conference event, produces all that type of stuff. He finally convinced me to do the STR thing, because I had a client in the limousine space and in the STR space named Richard Fertag, who was the founder of Short-Term Rental University. And we kind of rebuilt his entire platform for him. And, there wouldn't be any of us if he would have continued to do it with Chris and I building it behind him, because he would just dominate all of us. And we were going to plan the first conference for him at the same venue. We were going to host it in 2019. So we basically, him and I had a falling out, but I hosted his first boot camp in my office here in Nashville and kind of built the whole thing. And it took 2 years for Chris to convince me, hey, we just need to do this on our own, and now's the right time. So the one thing that I did, and I'm very cognizant of, I live behind two tenets. One, I don't let any assholes inside my inner circle. I don't have any desire or time to deal with that BS. And I believe in giving more than I receive. And so for the first 6 months, there was no product, there was nothing, no membership, no coaching calls, nothing. I spent 5 to 7 hours a day in every other Facebook group that was out there, because it was me and Chris and my wife and, a couple of friends, a couple of limo people at that time.
Right.
And by about the time that Christmas came around, I had about maybe 2,000 people in my Facebook group after 6 months.
Wow.
And which seems like nothing today, but it was ginormous for me that, I never got over like 1,500 in the limousine industry, because it was so small, such a small industry. And I did no ads, nothing. I just literally grinded in Facebook groups. And then I got on Clubhouse right around that time, and things started to, I was the black sheep on Clubhouse. And because I was everybody's talking about arbitrage and co-hosting and management. Nobody was talking about buying property and investing at that point. And so I started a mastermind. That was the very first thing that I did. And it was bringing my experience in 27 startups and building a couple of $30 million plus companies, to this industry. And that's the way that I treat each individual property. And nobody was discussing that at least from a coach's standpoint or an influencer standpoint or whatever that is. They're just talk about, renting proposies and
It was just a
hospitality. I'm like,
beds and heads mentality. I think
It-
that was the difference. It wasn't necessarily like
Feel the
vision behind it.
agree. And the ones that even got it, they focused on hospitality, where it's important. But for me, it's business is the most important. My P&Ls, my evaluations up front, my performas, my balance sheets, all that type of stuff. So I brought this business perspective that just nobody was speaking about. And what happened is the professionals, the 35 to 60-year-old people just started following me in droves because they were my people.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and I don't mean to like age segregate, but the ones that owned the entrepreneurs were my people. The ones that had jobs didn't really get it yet, right? That had never owned a business. And then it kind of just continued to manifest and grow and grow and grow. And once I hit like 5,000 or 6,000 people, so what I had to do is almost give away my mastermind. My mastermind's 15 grand a year now. I started at 4,500 bucks. And I just hand selected 15 people that were the most active in my group, that I'd had coaching calls with for free, that I'd started relationships with. And I said, I'd love to invite you to be an OG, and join my mastermind. And what I needed was people that were coachable, people that had the desire to learn and execute, and people that I knew would appreciate and become my advocates to help me grow my business.
Yeah, because they're
even though
already
I'm a
they're already
marketing guy,
interacting.
there's nobody better to grow a business than your customer base.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree. 100%. And I think it's interesting that you found the niche, right? And it's interesting that you look at it from like the age demographic, because to me, it would seem like it would be more of their background and where they are, right? Like we see people who have business backgrounds who come into this space and see it through a business lens, right?
Mhm.
There's the hustle mentality of people that, are hustling, maybe arbitraging. They don't look at it through the lens of a business. They're not looking at the P&Ls. They're not looking at profitability. They're looking at, the gross picture, and just more is better, not, that right is better. And, we're seeing that transition, right? From this hustle filter through to what we call the professionalization of the industry. And that line is being blurred now, right? Because that was typically something that was just held for professional managers within the space.
Right.
Professional managers know this. They have management companies that they're doing this. But now, with the advent and the introduction of new technology and masterminds and the educational opportunities that people have, you don't have to be a professional manager to get the tools to manage your properties effectively. And I think that's a game changer. It's interesting. It's definitely changing the way our industry looks and operates. But, what did you see first? Like, I see how you got into this, but your business mind, when did that opportunity really click? Like, this is a lane that you could put some polish on and really have it.
When I took that first house, the beach house in Fort Morgan, Alabama, it wasn't even in Gulf Shores, and it had done $45,000 the previous year under the property management company, and I did 98 grand in the first 12 months on my own, and then I did 114 the next year.
Wow.
And I repainted, we refurnished, I created my own direct booking site. I was leveraging social media. I added a golf cart. I 38 it, right? So
Right.
nobody was doing that stuff in Fort Morgan. I added a Mac Daddy golf cart with stereo and spinning rims and 4-inch lift kit and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Kayaks, paddle boards, all the shit that people do that's been standardized today, and was pretty much. I had bikes. So I kind of took the experience that I wanted in an upper scale area of 30A, because I live in the nouveau riche part of Nashville, the wealthy part of Nashville. The old school blue blood money is about 5-6 miles away from me. But when I'm running Facebook ads, we all want the same stuff.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how much money you have, you still want it cheaper.
Right.
So my marketing was, hey, you can drive, y'all can fucking drive down I-65. You're going to choose to go left to 30A and spend about $3,000 more a week, or you can come stay with me in Fort Morgan and save $3,000, have a bigger property, a more private beach, and all the amenities that you have there. That was my marketing stance. So that's the premise to answer your question. When I went from 45 to 112, and I was seeing about 6 times LTR rates and the STR rates, it's game on at that point. Right. And that's when I sold my condos here that I owned in Nashville. And I decided I was going to roll that into short-term rentals.
Nice.
It's interesting too. You mentioned a property management company, and you mentioned the fact that the 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 kind of the meld between like real estate companies that then turn into property. And if those are watching on Facebook, on YouTube, see that I'm putting air quotes here, like, turn into property management companies. Like, it's a totally different mindset. Just because you're good at real estate doesn't mean you're good at renting it out. And, and you are testament of that, because, you took it from, mediocre 45,000, which isn't bad. Like, it's a decent still return, but then to go ahead and, 2.5 that in year one for what, it's pretty significant, and it's just a different fucking mindset. And I love that about what you're doing. I want to talk about co-hosting, and not everyone, and it's for us in the professionally managed world, co-hosting is a relatively newer term. What is your definition of co-hosting?
The property owner has control, whereas a traditional property management company has control. The property owner is literally stripped of their investment. Typically, the property management company, if they're good at it, makes more money than the property owner does. They control everything. So for me, a co-host is different, at least the way that I operate. I can't speak for anybody else. My co-hosting clients own all of their assets, the OT, Airbnb, Verbo, everything. They collect all the funds, they pay all their taxes. I am a marketing and hospitality manager. That's what I do for them, right? Do I schedule cleaners? Yes, but it's all automated. Do I schedule maintenance if we need a plumber or something like that? I do make those phone calls. Do I escrow funds and take funds and then distribute and have an escrow account? Absolutely not. So I view myself as basically a revenue optimization, marketing, hospitality company. That's what I do as a co-host.
On average, do you think, what is a co-host, or what's their cut? Like, what do you make? Like for me, I would think, man, co-hosting, there's no money in that. Like, where I can go ahead, if I'm at a traditional property management situation, I know every market varies, the variable varies, but on average, it's anywhere from the homeowner is taking either 75 to 80%, and the property management company is making taking that 25 to 20%. In some situations, it's 15%, right? There, it's less.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know what the average is, nationwide. I can only share what I do. I mean, I have quite a few people in my mastermind. It's interesting, people that have started co-hosting because it is profitable. So I started with my good friend Bill, and very publicly, he was at the first conference. Marty, who's the sensei on Cobra Kai and Karate Kid, was my second co-hosting client. They were both 18%. And 18%, but I'm a little bit different. I charge a $299 a month retainer. So there's a couple of things that I hate about traditional property management. One, they own everything, and it's a closed box that the homeowner does not get access to. We don't see the actual transactions on the direct booking or the OTAs. They hide those from us. So I wanted full transparency. That's why my clients own every asset, and they are the primary. And sometimes I'm the primary host. Sometimes my client's the primary host. It depends on what access they want to see with all the messaging and everything. But that's up to their discretion. I don't really care. So I want to be transparent. I'm not going to handle any of their money. And most importantly, I'm not going to hold them to future bookings. So literally, I have a 30-day cancellation. That's it. 30 days, just because, and I'll cancel in 5 days if the owner's ready to take over, or if they're unhappy with my services and want to hire a PM or another co-host. So that's how I basically built my parameters, my contract, the way I would want to be treated as the homeowner. So I charge the $299 as the insurance policy. I don't even know, but I probably have $1 million plus booked between today and Labor Day on my co-hosting accounts through the summer.
And
I
how
have
many
and
co-hosting accounts are you running?
I have 13 right now.
Okay, we already talked. Sorry about that. Yeah.
And probably close to $1 million, if not over. And every one of them could cancel today and take all that revenue, and I would lose my between 18 to 22% commission. That's what the $299 retainer is for. It's just a small retainer to protect my future, and it doesn't cover advertising or marketing or anything like that. It's just so they have the ability to exit at any time if I don't perform. And they say, well, why would you do that compared to everybody else attaches to, I think Evolve is like 90 days or 6 months or a year or whatever. And it goes back to my sales pitch. I'm so fucking confident that I'm going to be the best co-host or property manager that you will ever see. As long as you own this property, that I'm willing to let you out immediately, because that makes me earn my commission every single stay. Right. And then when I tell somebody that and they see the confidence from me, and this is all my co-hosting masterclass, by the way, but that confidence is what's critical for people. And back to the PM, literally I took over a property on January 1st, the last one that I've added, and it's about a quarter of a mile from my number one producing property in Gulf Shores, in West Beach, if anybody's familiar with that. It's just over the bridge, and a beachfront property, 6'4", with an elevator and a hot tub, no pool. And they did 185 last year. That's a joke. I mean, literally the owner should sue the property manager. I don't know who they were using, but should sue the property management for negligence, because that property, he asked me what we could do. And I said, oh, we'll do 250, 260. If I don't do 300 plus on a down year, even, looking at 20, 30% down with that property, then I'm not doing my job. And we're tracking like, I think 291 right now going into the summer with open dates. And it's one of the fundamental reasons is my focus is marketing, listing optimization, email marketing, and Facebook ads. Those three things is what I do to drive higher revenues.
Those three things.
Most PMs don't do that.
I will agree that a lot of PMs do not do that. I agree that those, the actual marketing aspects, the email, the social, the driving people to the business and differentiating compared to the others. I can agree with you. I disagree in to an extent that a lot of, you mentioned that PMs do not, let me backtrack. A lot of property managers are very transparent. And so I think that generalizing the fees and all these different things and not being transparent for, professionally managed or traditional property managers, I don't think that's accurate. For sure there are some. I'm not saying that there are not, but I think there are some very good property managers that are very transparent and do come through with what they're saying. But then you take the next level and with you co-hosting and what you're doing in your masterclass and really focusing on the marketing, and that's the differentiator there.
There's no question that I don't want to say that it's that they don't know how to market, but they market their company. You can see it with the big one, Vacasa and Evolve, all day long, right? Just go to their website and you'll see how they market. They don't market individual properties. And that's the fundamental thing that I would love for them to understand, to benefit their owners and to come into the new age. We can't market our business. We have to market the individual properties to the right people that are interested in going to those properties. And you can do it so easily, on Facebook or LinkedIn or Google, wherever you want to do that. And it kind of ties into the rankings, if you will. You have to be ranked. The higher you're ranked on Airbnb and Vrbo, the better opportunity you have to implement higher pricing, right? And there's marketing strategies that will help that. I actually drive traffic to both my OTAs, and some of them I use TripAdvisor. I don't do booking at all, but predominantly just Airbnb and Vrbo. I can tell you the majority of the old school companies that I am aware of, hundreds of them, they are not transparent. I think the new age, like yourselves, are definitely more transparent. I see some in all the markets that I'm in, and even clients that I have that deal with them. The newer ones are, but the old schoolers definitively are not, from my experience.
I actually agree with that. I think it's a big cultural shift in marketing tactics also, right? Because you have these cottage industries that are catching up with technology, right? They're catching up with how to market and building direct booking strategies. And now you have to have social media in how, and it's not just having it, it's how you do it, right? And it's the concept I love. Like they never had to highlight individual properties and or had the capability to highlight individual properties in the way that they do right now. And so I think it's interesting. There's this push, from the host side of the business, um, and the younger side of the business to say, hey, like they're showing you how to get it done, and it'll be interesting to see who adapts and does it, and who kind of digs their heels in and continues to do what they're doing.
As we talked about in the pre-show, I kind of went through this in an old school, stodgy, non-technology based industry in the ground transportation space where I built a 10 million. It was easy for me to build a $10 million ground transportation company in Nashville because I leverage marketing and technology like HubSpot. If anybody's heard of HubSpot, I was the 33rd customer of HubSpot's in January of 2007.
Wow.
And we just got disrupted by Uber and then Lyft and then Via, right? And we all are Uber users and Lyft users today. Probably nobody listening to this, unless they're like an executive corporate traveler, is booking a sedan or an SUV to go to dinner and paying for it to wait for 3 hours when you can Uber there and Uber back. Right. Or the same thing for the airport. And I don't even do it anymore. I'm an Uber guy. But I was competing against them, and I see a very similar thing happening, that the old school PMs are going to have to learn and catch up from the technology side of what the nouveau riche hosts are doing, the owners, and also the co-hosts and the young property management companies, because it's all technology based. I mean, I'd be interested at VRMA this year. Hopefully they'll do some surveys. I want to know how many of them are using AI, in their marketing, in their hosting. And I'll bet it's a very small percentage. And then if it is, break that down by age demographic. And I think you'll get some really telling data. That's what we found in our industry when we went through kind of a similar disruption. I just think this one's going to be a lot slower.
Well, let's actually dive into that a little bit. Let's talk about, you mentioned VRMA, and I want to talk about, there's two different, well first, before we go there, I agree with what you're saying, and definitely like looking at these old antiquated property management companies using antiquated systems. They're like these legacy companies that have been doing this for 30 years, 40 years in vacation destination markets. And, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, it's fucking broke. Like, you got to fix it. Like, you got to go ahead and look at it and figure out how to compete with all these up and comers. And they're everywhere. And, Joe's somebody down the street that had 5 Airbnbs and, now is figured out, oh, I got this tech and I can do all this, and I'm using all these different things, and I'm using homeowner acquisition tools. And now I've gone for 5. I'm at 30 in a year. I have a great friend in Hilton Head that went from, with 0 to over 100 in a year, like fucking crushing it, right? Tech, using it, and embracing it. But let's talk about, you mentioned VRMA. And there's a huge difference. So I'm a prior, I don't know if I'm still on the VRMA board. I have no idea. Not a membership committee, not board. There's been there are 2 different camps here. And Mateo and I are big believers that there should be one camp for the greater good of STR overall in alternate accommodations, and how do we go ahead and make this accessible, and make tech and knowledge and advocacy accessible for all. Where VRMA crushes, they are at the forefront of advocacy. They're doing a lot of amazing things for that, but where they are falling flat, in my personal opinion, is being open and accessible and actually delivering like knowledge. Like to go to a VRMA conference, if I was a property manager, I'd want to get some fucking knowledge. I wanted some to come away with, like, man, I came up with these great nuggets, and like, I'm going to go ahead and put this into my, and they do it in certain places, but they don't do it all the time. And where I know I'm speaking in circles here. Where I'm trying to go is there are old school VRMA, legacy people that are like solid property managers and solid business owners that would look at your conference and roll their fucking eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They will. And they're like, oh, what the fuck? Like, this is a get rich quick scheme. It's blah, blah, blah. But you name it, you input it in there and they're going to say something like that. I think where, after going to your STR Wealth Conference, which I got a lot of great things out of, I think it was a lot of up, but then it was like, okay, what happens next? Oh, like, this is how you do it. This is how you get into it. And for me personally, what I got out of it as someone that knows the industry decently well, okay, I've got my foot in the door. I'm getting excited. Things are going, but it seemed like this is how you do it. And then there wasn't much more depth from that. I think that if we brought your mindset or, that mindset together with the VRMA mindset of like I think there's a meld that we're not seeing between all these different organizations and these different mindsets and those that are fresh in with amazing perspectives and those that have been doing this and been in the trenches for fucking ever. I think there's a win-win-win for everybody if we all just put down our fucking guards and be like, hey, we're all in this together. How do we win together?
I don't disagree with you. I don't know enough people in that side, if you will, to even know who would be the influencer. But I will tell you from past experience, it's going to if there is a divide, which from what you're saying, it sounds like there is.
100% there is.
And I don't know who's created that divide, but it's going to take people from both sides of influence to be able to broker that. And it's not going to be arbitrary. And the big problem is that like my event next year will be bigger than VRMA. There's no question. And then that's going to create a territorial issue, between them and our event potentially. And it just becomes harder and harder. I would be the first one to say, if you guys are on the board or whatever, give me an introduction. I'll go to their event or, do whatever, because I agree with you. And, like I said, I've been through this in the ground transportation space and I've been on both sides of that fence. And I think that what you will see growing is both will have to evolve. They have to, right? To be able to compete with each other. And it's just like we do with any type of hosting, right? The more of you guys that are out there doing podcasts and education, the more people like myself that are doing it, whoever, it influence, the reach gets bigger and bigger to bring more people into our industry. If there wasn't all of our stuff in Clubhouse and podcasts and social media and stuff during COVID, there's no question that the boom happened a lot in part of what we all did. We talked about our successes. We shared that, and then from an educational standpoint, people see it and then they want to get into it, right? And there's thousands of people with more influence than I have on social media, good, bad, and indifferent that can do that. And, I look at young people, like I got to know the Robinsons pretty well at my conference, and, they started in a completely different way, than I started. And there's so many different avenues to break into it. I think the thing that's going to be, I guess my point is, I think you're 100% correct. It needs to happen sooner rather than later, to be honest with you. And I don't know why there's a rift.
I know why.
I might be part of it because I'm not a fan of old school property managers, because not because of the position I'm in today. That lingers from the experience that I had with that old school property management company, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. And it actually, the question I was going to ask you is like, how do you envision the unification? But then hearing you talk, the reality is to get involved with both, because, John, I chair a committee for VRMA and work with VRMA very closely, but I'm also very much so an advocate to VRMA should be the place where everyone has something. There should be content, right? Like, they don't focus on that side of the business. They've never had to. right?
Yep.
They've always been able to continue to do and operate within the space that they felt comfortable. But now the industry is growing and evolving with or without it. And so they are seeing that and they're working, and we are working to do something about that. And it has to be more inclusive. Like it does. Like it has to. You have to court this part of the business. You have to build and create content for that type
Yep.
of the business at these shows and make these things relevant. And I think, like you said earlier, there's room for everyone, right? Like at the end of the day, we're in the infancy of this new age of our industry. And it's, if you can have a central place that's beneficial for all, with giving people the ability to still work and do the things that they do individually, like there's room for everyone to be able to do that and do that well. And I just don't buy the narrative, because I think there are differences, but we're all under the same roof. And what co-hosts do affect what property managers do, and vice versa, right? And especially with where we are right now and the regulatory fights, everyone sees us as one anyone. They're not one anyway. They're going to be like short-term rental, vacation rental manager, whatever you call it. You're using Airbnb and you're using these platforms, and we're all in all of these fights together. And so for the good and the bad. And that's where I think we have to talk to each other and we need to be involved. Like there's things that I'm not saying VRMA needs to go to these conferences, but members of VRMA are going to your conference, right? And presented at your conference this year. It's happening. It's integrating. So like, why don't we just adopt it, embrace it? And instead of fighting it, let's make more opportunities to do this right, and everybody wins. So
I think there's a lot to unpack there. I don't know if anybody's actually fighting it. I think they may not know. So I am not educated on VRMA. I have never been to a VRMA event. Frankly, I've never cared about VRMA because I've talked.
This is your invite.
So I think Maddie Rivkin
International in Orlando, VRMA International. We are personally inviting you to come to VRMA International and let's start there.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys saw Maddie Rivkin's, I think it was Maddie Rivkin that posted on LinkedIn about bringing, VRMA and somebody from VRMA and myself and another gentleman, to have a conversation at VRMA, to have a panel about it.
Yeah. I love it.
And I'm more than happy to do that. And then Will, who hosts both of our podcasts, right? Are you guys with Will?
Yep.
And he did a podcast last week. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it because I was traveling, to kind of start that narrative, which is one thing I love about Will Slickers is, he's like Switzerland, and he does a great job of, all bringing people together. But I think that it will benefit the industry, for it to come together. There is absolutely no question. There's no difference. And there's people that, it's the acronyms. It's, vacation STRs and, arbitrage and co-host. And then I Airbnb, and you hear like Sean Raskovich, he Airbnbs, but I guess I don't Airbnb. Right. So I don't even, and I'm not saying he's saying anything wrong, but I don't know the difference, so what does everybody else know? So one of the things that I've looked at, there needs to be, if you're going to do this, the biggest problem in our industry, in my opinion, is there is no national organization. And it can't be VRMA and it can't be us. It needs to be like a legitimate, unbiased national organization that has the entire short-term rental industry at heart to advocate for. And we have, different entities that are advocating against each other in our industry. And that's going to be problematic.
I think VRMA is always wanted to be, and they were the national, the national, that's their purpose. They're trying to be, but they need to be more inclusive in understanding to actually be that. I think it's still the platform to do it. It's also, but the problem is,
I would 100% disagree with you. I think there's too much water under the bridge, and their mission and their name would all have to change, specifically from a lobbying standpoint.
Good point. Yeah. How is the rental management going to lobby in Philly or Atlanta?
That becomes really challenging. And that's what I'm saying. There's a national association for almost every industry that is just a nonprofit national organization.
But it's interesting though, because we do it, right? So I'm in Atlanta, and we advocate, and VRMA supports the Atlanta Metro Short-Term Rental Alliance, right? Like in that space. And the majority of the Atlanta Metro Short-Term Rental Alliance is co-hosts and individual owners.
But
right?
imagine if you're going in front of city council and you had the National STR Association there, and you had their attorney or their lobbyist or the president of their coming in to sit down and represent along with your association, that they listen to them. And that's what I'm sharing just as my experience, because I donate to almost all of these.
Yeah. No, the problem is they listen to Airbnb, right? And regardless of what you call it, short-term rental, STR, I think there's calling it Airbnb is limiting, right? Like within that space, it's like the Xeroxing of copying machines, right? Like no matter if Canon or anyone else made it, you were making a Xerox copy, right? And so like we've kind of done that to our space. And I think that's the part that minimalizes our language. Like we're all hospitality at the end of the day, and we're all, short-term hospitality, if you want to put it within that space. And I think I don't disagree with what you're saying about a national organization. I think whatever you call it shouldn't be the divisive point if what we do is similar in the same point in terms with starting with hospitality and then differentiating on how you do that hospitality. But the reality is we cross so far. I mean, you can argue the nuances, but the reality of what we need to do to be successful is similar and the same. So
USSTRA, U.S. Short-Term Rental Association. It's that simple. It covers everything. And all I'm saying is if you're going to advocate, or if you're going up to second reading on a bill, in Atlanta, and it's one thing if you have your local association, but it's another if you have an established national association that has PR, that has built a trusted brand in our industry on a national scale. I've seen in other HVAC industry, I've seen it in the ground transportation industry, when they're fragmented state by state, city by city, it's when we lose the battles from a lobbying standpoint. And there is no chance, in my opinion, that we will ever beat Airbnb, ever. But we can get these small wins of getting stuff grandfathered versus, having things eliminated, and, just a lot of, we can get a lot of big wins. And I definitely advocate for a national association, but I think it's got to be broad reaching over everything.
I think I'm going to come back. I think VRMA still is it. I just think it's an unfortunate, like pigeonholed name of Vacation Rental Manager Association. It is our national. It's the longest.
They would have to change that to be all inclusive.
Yeah.
And yes, I agree. Like that is number one.
And you think about that, that's the number one. Their name is what keeps new investors and new co-hosts from even having any interest, into what they do, because that's the first roadblock. And it may seem
it's
like
a rebrand. Maybe
100%.
It's starting there with a rebrand, because they had the advocacy. They do have
the footprint to be they're international. Right. You have to understand they're also international, right? And unified in that space internationally. And
I love this conversation, by the way.
I do think it's super interesting. I do agree with you though, John. Like I think they have the footprint to make this happen, but I think Bill also has a really great point. Like, what can you do to be more inclusive? That's an interesting point. If you feel like the name is, exclusionary in and of itself, right? Like,
I'm just going to share with you guys.
That's an interesting point.
I just pulled up U.S. Short-Term Rental Association, USSTRA.com. So I would maybe buy that, since you guys are on the board or whatever of VRMA. That's something along those lines. What's that?
I want to clarify for those listening. We're not on the board. We're on committees.
Committees. Gotcha. Yeah. Like that's the all-encompassing entity. Mm-hmm. And to where it's not segmented to vacation rental management companies, right? And it's literally $69 for that domain. I'll buy it right now and put it in my account, and we've got it recorded. I'll give it to VRMA if they rebrand, because that's what we need. I mean, I love Rent Responsibly. I like Theron Lewis. They're out there. Their minds are all in the right place, but they have no impact when they show up in Nashville to the city council. right? They may donate dollars, they may help with lobbyists, but you have the president or a lobbyist coming from DC that actually can get a hold of a state senator or whoever's writing those bills and have conversations from a national scope. That's where we see policy, being changed. And it takes a lot of fucking money. There's no question. We're not talking 50 grand to 100 grand. We're talking millions of dollars to make this happen.
Oh, and again, and that's the thing that I feel like VRMA actually gets right. They push the idea that is not out there. I think advocacy, everybody thinks advocacy is somebody else's issue to fight, right? In our space, because we look at what it takes to galvanize us together, right? To get out and actually contribute time, resources, and money and other things to these fights, right? And our fragmentation doesn't help, but that is one thing that VRMA does very well. They raise a lot of money for it, and they do a lot of local support. Like, we couldn't be where we are in Atlanta without them, just being 100% honest.
Right.
Through case studies that they've funded, through money that they've been able to give, and resources that they've been able to arm us with, along with Rent Responsibly, to get the things that we're getting done in Atlanta right now. And I think, giving them credit where credit is due, like, that's going to be a large part of, being able to, we can lobby, but it's also the people on the ground that are going to be making this, because we're fighting a hotel lobby, we're fighting with or against, or sometimes both, Airbnb. And then, the local empowerment is really where these councils are wanting to see, unification and not divisiveness. And that's what I think they're doing a really good job at. But again, the bigger picture, is, it takes us all. Like, it does. It really is. And whether they're one organizations, two organizations, it's where I stand is, we've always been Switzerland, and we'll do what's best for the industry and support what's best for the industry. But it has to be inclusive. It just has to. Like, we won't win this fight alone.
I see two events for VRMA, one in October and one in September. What's the difference?
October is the biggest, the international conference. It's the main conference that they have.
I don't know which one's in September. Is
September 24th through the 26th. It's a 3-day event. It's VRM Extravaganza Marketplace.
Oh no, two different.
Oh, yeah,
so
no,
that's Favor. That's Florida's specific one. That's Florida.
Okay, gotcha.
Vacation rental managers. Two different lines. So Florida has Favor, which is their own, which is Florida. It used to be Florida VRMA. Then they had to rebrand because they're totally different. But that one specifically, it encompasses Florida vacation rental.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Which is a great show. Too for Florida. It's I go every year. Two things I want to talk before we get out of here. You mentioned earlier, we talked about what is, why is the polarization, or what do you think is, and you're like, maybe it's me. I think the reason, there's two things. Or maybe one, I don't think it's you. I think it is there with COVID and with there was a bunch of, there's good information being put out. And then there's just a bunch of get rich quick, earn $1 million using your iPhone and Airbnb. And that is the perception that anyone that's been for a while in the trenches of the professionally managed world of vacation rentals think everything else is other than what they're doing. So they think that it's a bunch of smoke and mirrors, that you and everyone else is just going ahead and like, this is what you do. And you don't have to, and it's willy-nilly, and it's not a real focus on actual hospitality. It's a focus on getting rich. And I think that's the fucking difference. And I think that if we could break that barrier down, hey, it's not, yes, of course it's about making money. That's the same reason that they're in the industry too. Like, let's be frank here. Like, they got into vacation rentals because they could see a way to take care of their family and make a lot of fucking money, right? There's no difference. We're all in it for the same reason, but the difference is the optics of certain, like, we could scroll through social media. I'm like, and I can go, that's shitty advice. That's terrible advice. There's a lot of bad advice out there, but then there's great advice. And I think the professionally managed side of things is clumping it all into, this is all bad advice. I think that's the problem. We need to go ahead and break that barrier down and say,
can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah.
I think
Please.
one of the problems is the term that you're using, professionally managed. So that is a divisive component that
I agree.
you're implying to me that I'm not a professional.
I agree. I agree.
Well,
But
I think that's the way that homeowners and co-hosts would take that.
But I think that's changing. And I know actually I'm even changing the way that I speak about that, right? Because I think the assumption is when you're talking about professional management, you're talking about a professional management company. When I'm actually talking about the actions in and of itself, I don't care if you have 10 and aren't a professional management company and you're hosting by yourselves. If you're managing in a professional manner, looking at P&Ls, taking care of us, running it in a professional space, that's what I mean in that. And I'm not limiting that to professional traditional vacation rental managers.
And I'm not saying the two of you, but that
Well, no, I think we need to change
it's a VRMA stigmatism, right? That has to be removed.
Again, this
Yeah,
is
that's
this
what I'm
is
saying.
where
Change
we're
the
looking at the
dialogue now,
inclusivity.
right?
It's like, how do we go
Yeah.
ahead and break down some of these barriers? How do we go ahead and look at these words and these terminologies and these things that these constructs that we've built to
It's like when I say,
but
Mateo, I'm
here's-
not going to hold that against you, but you did this 2 years ago and it pisses me off, right?
Right.
So I think that's the language is probably the biggest component, to be honest with you.
I agree
The
100
language has to change first. And honestly, I think there should probably be a panel of not like 2 or 3 people. If VRMA will commit to put me on a panel with somebody in Orlando, I'll commit to do the exact same fucking thing at my conference. And we need to have like a monthly meeting and draft out a strategy of how this would work.
Yeah.
Right. And really I'd be open enough to identify, here's the problems that we see today as an industry. Here's what the ultimate goal is. Could be national association, could be just improved advocacy at a local state level, whatever that is. Well, unify the goals, then let's start working towards that goal. And then it's probably a fucking committee, below that. And I'm not talking a committee of just people that nobody knows. Like, we need influencers. I hate that word, but
Yeah.
people that have a voice in the industry to lead that charge.
Would you be down? I mean, would you be down for a panel that Mateo and I co-moderated?
Yeah, you guys put it together. I'll put it on my calendar.
Let us get with the I'm going to share this with the team so they can just hear it. The day to turn in presentations has passed. It was Monday. It was yesterday. But they always kind of have a sliding scale for good presentations. So I'm sure we can still sneak one in. Let me talk and we'll see who else we want to get on this panel and see.
I'm down for that.
Awesome. Hey,
Yeah.
Bill, I know we've gotten to the end of our time here, but what would you like to say? Like, what would you like to say to, about whatever, before we get out of here? And hey, it's your time to shine outside.
I mean, just, thank you for having me, and I appreciate it. And if anybody, has any questions, you can always, the easiest place is probably DM me on Instagram. It's Bill Faeth, Faeth 73. And every place else I'm B Faith. I got hacked, and so I lost my B Faith on Instagram, but B Faith every TikTok, Facebook, kind of all the other places that are out there. I think it's a great time to invest. I think it's a great time to buy. If you are a sound investor and you evaluate properties from a financial perspective and you're running pro formas, if it can work at 7.5, 8.25%, which is what most people are paying right now, then it's going to be really good when you can reposition in 24, 36 months, 48 months down to 5%. It
Right.
will come back. We'll probably, I don't know that I'm probably too old to ever see 2.75 again, but we will
It's
get
not
back.
going back there.
No, probably not. And I don't want it to. The thing I think from an investor side is people are afraid to invest today
I know.
because interest rates are high, because there's a looming recession. Well, we're either in a recession now because it's been looming for 14 months, 15 months, and we've never had that type of heads up. It's just all political propaganda bullshit, in my opinion. So if you can make the property work today financially, and you have the wherewithal, the finances behind it to carry a property if you're buying, then do it. If you don't have the money, start by co-hosting. If you're young and you don't have any cash, you can start co-hosting for nothing, like literally zero. You probably legitimate need about $1,000 to go file an LLC, get some articles of incorporation, and get some insurance. But those are the two easiest barriers to to entry. And, you know, I love what you guys are chatting about, and I love the unification standpoint. I didn't realize how big the separation was until today, you know, to be honest with you. And it kind of started with that LinkedIn post from Maddie maybe last week. But I think that's something that we need to nip in the butt quickly, and try to figure something out of what that best course of action is. Not for VRMA, not for the short-term rental wealth conference or Bill Faeth or
No,
anybody.
for the greater good.
100%, but for the industry. Because I've seen personally what happens in industries that are dysfunctional, and smaller industries that have no voice that are unified. And we're going to need that more than ever. I mean, I don't know if you guys have your finger on the pulse nationwide or not, but I mean, it's every fucking day that I hear something about new regulation getting ready to drop. And almost it's not just Philly and Dallas and Atlanta and Honolulu anymore.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. We talk about the importance of getting involved early and, you know, in your community, because if you don't have regulatory issues today, whether you're a vacation destination or not, you're going to have them. And so make yourself a presence, make yourself in that community, be the source of knowledge, be the source of truth, be the person that, hey, I work in the vacation rental or short-term rental or co-hosting or whatever the fuck you want to call it. It doesn't matter. I'm a professional in this industry. You can trust me. Let's go ahead and talk, and let's work through this together before shit hits the fan, because at some point it's going to hit the fan.
Well, I kind of go back. I have I mean, I just supported Dallas a couple of months ago with a donation, and, you know, I try to help financially. I don't have the time to get involved with every one of these local municipalities, but I will tell you the one thing that I've seen successful, whether it's VRMA, a new association, whatever it is, they need to put the blueprint together and distribute that to people in every municipality. And they need to have an educational program on how to start and organize, right? Because Honolulu had nothing. And thank God for John On and Kate Bliss and these people that are there, that were able to organize and reach out to Theron and reach out to me and to these people that could help them, that have been through these things before. Because it's by the time a piece of legislation hits first reading, it's too late. It's essentially rubber stamped at the end of that meeting, and it's going to pass whatever it is, unless you have a lot of money and lobbyists and attorneys to put into action immediately that have direct recourse into the people that are controlling that vote. So I think the number one thing for me is that our industry has to form, and it's hard. I'm trying to do it in Whitefish, Montana right now. And it is that whole area. There's pockets of where the back office, you know, city council people have picked and choose where they live and where they want to regulate or not regulate. And thank God I bought out in the middle of nowhere, but inside the county and the city limits, it's just like every place else. But getting people to want to form an organization is almost impossible, even for somebody that has a reach like I do. And I already know 5 or 6 homeowners there. We'll end up with 5 or 6 members, and that's not going to do us any good, you know, walking into a city council meeting if we have to. So I think early execution to get these local municipalities ready to be able to, I don't want to say fight, but to defend what we currently have, should be a big initiative on whatever entity is going to lead that charge.
Yeah,
I agree.
And responsibly, just to put it out there, if there are people out there that are in that situation, they have the starter kits on their website in their resource section. They have the how to get it started, everything from templates to reach out to your local city councilman and other municipality people. So they do have a blueprint, but they also have links to other organizations that are in the midst of the fight that can be resources for you and give you other resources within the fight.
See, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, shout out to David Krause and Alexa
out there. And, you know, Dave and what Dana and Alexa are doing are a hell of a job in terms of doing that part too. VRMA is doing their part. And like, this is part of the problem. People don't know that, right? This should be central.
Because there needs to be marketing efforts behind that to get that in the hands of the right people.
Right. And that's the problem with, that's the problem with segregated networks, because it goes within the networks, but it doesn't expand to people who need it beyond that.
It's really, it's a simple fix by somebody like VRMA and somebody that owns a conference like I do. Because when you sign up for my conference, I know your first name, your last name, the city that we ask the city that you operate in, VRMAs, because sponsors demand that information, right? So VRMA is asking for the same info that we're asking for. We can cherry pick municipalities and ask people to come to a free lunch, and we get somebody, the No BS podcast comes in and sponsors lunch for 10 grand. And literally we bring 2 or 3 people from each one of those markets in and put 100 or 150 people for a free lunch. And then we advocate for them and say, here's this. Somebody needs to lead in your marketplace. If you're not that person, here's why it's important, right? And you give them that bullet pointed slide. And if you may not be the person that's here, but we need your help so you don't get fucked down the line when you find out about that legislation and it's too late to find somebody to be the advocate in your market.
Yep. Big fact.
Bill, this has been awesome. Thank you. I appreciate
Thank you guys.
We just got started. We could talk another hour.
We'll definitely have you back.
I thought this was a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah, we'll have you back. It could have easily gone that way for sure.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you. For those of you that are listening to our podcast, and have not liked us on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, give us a like, leave us a review. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and smash that like button, share, do all that, hit the bell, all that shit that you're supposed to do. We appreciate you. And thank you so much. Until next time.
Grateful.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Bill.
This podcast is a Hospitality.fm production.